We're here today to talk about transitioning from Interface Builder using auto layouts and constraints and a WYSIWYG editor where you drag objects around to create your user interface to the SwiftUI methodology of creating a user interface where you write out your user interface literally in code. Now, right here in front of you, as you can see, I've got two simulators running. One app was written using Interface Builder. The other app was written using SwiftUI. And what I'd like to do is start out by showing you how similar SwiftUI and Interface Builder are from the beginning, how they diverge, and yet how they maintain many similarities even after diverging. Uh, when you see the next two projects, I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. And this is just a teaser. I don't like to show code before I actually let you watch me write it out, but in this case, I think it's worthwhile. Let's minimize these two and bring up a storyboard project where you see there's a storyboard and there's the code behind. I mean, we've got a couple outlets, and here's an IB action. This is a login screen, by the way. And then let's look at the Swift UI thing here, and watch here how we can compare things really pretty closely. Think about it. Uh, Look here, stack view, right? Well, that's in Interface Builder. Look over in Swift UI. We've got a vertical stack. And then again, here over in the Interface Builder project, we've got a text field, a UI text field, a UI label, and a UI button. While in Swift UI, what do we have? A text field, a text field, a text, which is basically a label here, and then a button with an action. You see the similarities here? I mean, we even got the vertical stack, which, before Swift UI, I was using uh, stack views all over the place because they were allowing me to aggregate multiple user interface components onto one super object that I could put anywhere, and the um, relationships between the objects would stay the same within the stack view. So without further ado, let's get in and write some code. It's going to be worth it for us to wire up the interface builder version of this login user interface so that we can see the commonalities, like I had reminded you earlier about Swift UI having a V stack, a vertical stack of user interface components, where Interface Builder had a stack view. And then again, look at the organization here. We've got a stack of components: a text field for username, a text field for password, a label, a button that ostensibly logs you in. Same thing here. We've got a text field, a label, and a button to log you in, which doesn't, no login happens, but let's pretend it does. So let's go ahead and wire up a interface builder version of a login screen. So, you know, where are we going to get our objects? Well, the Object Explorer, right? So first thing we need is a text field, right? So there's a text field, and then there's another text field, and then we're going to want a label, and then we're going to want a button right there. Okay. Now, I hope you guys see where I'm going with this, and this is pretty normal in a simple user interface to have a vertical stack of user interface components. And so once I arrange things a little bit here, we will embed these four components into a stack view in Interface Builder. So first, let's username here, and then password here, and then we'll say status, and then we'll call this the login button. So let's use the auto grid lines here, snap to grid to center things, and use the automatic default safe space to nearest neighbor. And then let me do something here. I guess it could be a hack. I mean, depending on, you probably have some limit on the size of a username and a password. So let's go ahead and give these a safe, hard coding here of, we'll call it width, and let's see, well, we'll get to that later. Let's do the same here. We'll give it a width, and then we'll say this guy needs to be certain space to the safe area, and this guy needs to be the default distance from the guy above him, and this guy needs to be the same as what I just did, vertical standard spacing, and this one will be the same here, vertical standard spacing. And what's wrong with this guy here? Missing constraints. Oh, and they say it needs an X position. And so what we're going to do with all these guys here is, why don't we say they're all horizontal in the container, and then let's do something that many of us were used to doing before SwiftUI came along. When we had groups and related groups of UI components like this, to keep them easily maintainable and easily portable, and if we were to move it around or something, we can group them together. And One really easy way to do that is to highlight all of them and embed them in a stack view. And there we go. That's our basic layout there. Now to make this more like SwiftUI, let's take this stack view and let's make it horizontally and vertically centered, because SwiftUI tends to want to keep things simple, and by default your VStack is going to be centered and in the middle of the iPhone screen. So we'll add these two constraints, and you'll see this here. And then we'll make this go away, and then you'll see here, this is the screen here. It's a version of the same project. It's all the same code, trust me. And I think you can see why I brought this up, mainly to show you that there are still similarities between Interface Builder and SwiftUI, and you can use those to your advantage because, a rose by any other name. Sometimes something that works just works, so you just keep doing it the same way, and you'll see that some things, at least the way you lay things out in code in SwiftUI, well, they work and they look a lot like you would conceptualize them in Interface Builder. Remember that we're building a login form using SwiftUI, but we started with an app that used Interface Builder and auto layout because we want to talk about people who are making the transition from the quote old way of doing user interfaces with Interface Builder and auto layout and constraints to the new way, the new world, SwiftUI. So let's just make one of these login forms happen in SwiftUI and talk about SwiftUI. I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail because I want you to just see the SwiftUI, see how I write it, see how fast I write it, and start thinking about the change if you're one of those people making the change. And if you're not, you're probably bored and have already turned this video off by now. So let's start by making a new SwiftUI app. So we'll go to File, New, Project, and we'll do an iOS app. And we'll call it SwiftUI Starter. And we don't want a storyboard, we want SwiftUI, language Swift. We go to next, and we save it. So, look what Xcode is doing. Xcode is already rendering the SwiftUI interface that ships with new SwiftUI apps. And look at this wonderful, what it gave us, a hello world screen. And so, why can't I move this down? Well, you can see it. I cannot move it. Anyway, so you see here, this is SwiftUI, and it's interesting because think about it. We're not in some WYSIWYG editor here. We're writing interface code to draw the user interface. We're not using a drag and drop tool. We're not pulling objects out of an object library and dragging them onto a storyboard and connecting them with lines and stuff like that. We're writing it in code, and I think there are some advantages to that. So let's take a look at some structure here. If you look at a new SwiftUI app, if you go, this is the main entry point. Check this out. We've got a struct, which means that we're using value semantics, which generally are supposedly safer than reference semantics, and I can understand that argument. So this is the app, and our app could potentially have multiple scenes, um, and this content view is actually calling the constructor of a SwiftUI view that we will build to display. So this is the entry point to the app, and notice this body sum scene. Well, let's take this content view and let's see how it's defined. It's defined fancifully enough in content view.swift. So check this out. Again, we've got a value type called content view, which inherits from a protocol called view. Now, this is unlike UIKit, where most everything inherits from UIKit, but all the components in UIKit are classes. In SwiftUI, everything inherits from view, and so everything is a protocol. So when you're developing in SwiftUI, the language has been designed so you declare a variable that represents what you're going to draw on screen. So you can think of the body, the contents of this view that we're defining as defining some view. Now, some means we're declaring an opaque type of view. And an opaque type means that, you know what? This body variable can return almost any kind of type that inherits from view. So this gives SwiftUI incredible flexibility because we can build a whole bunch of really complicated stuff here or a bunch of really simple stuff. And either way you cut it, you're always going to have var body of type some view. So remember that opaque type. And opaque, the word opaque means it's, like a frosted window that you can't really see through. It's not clear what's on the other side, but you've got a good idea that the sky is out there. So, okay, we can see that we've got this. I'm going to try this again here, but I don't seem to be having any luck with it. What if I expand the screen? Can I then? Yes, there we go. Okay, so let's draw our login screen. Now, okay, this is nice and everything, but you know what? For our purposes, we don't want it. So we're going to take that out. Look, guys, check out where I am. I'm in a V-stack, a vertical stack. In other words, a vertical top to bottom stack of user interface components that happens over and over again in user interfaces. So remember the login form. What did we start with? Well, let's just to start out, we'll make it just look like a login form. We'll worry about making it work in another video. I want you guys to see and think about SwiftUI and the transition from Interface Builder in this video. So let's bang this out really quickly. So we'll say text and just say username here, like we did in the Interface Builder app. And then let's just say text, and then we'll say password here. And then we'll create a label, a status label, and we'll use this type because it's easy, and I'll show you why. We'll just say status like we did in the other app, and instead of using an image next to it, we'll just put a blank string, which eliminates the need for an image, and you can get away with it by passing a blank string. And then finally, let's do a button with a title and an action. And so we know the title to the button, right? That's easy. We want a login form, right? Now, let's double click on this because this is a closure. You guys know all about closures. If you don't, look them up on my website, iosbrain.com. But let's double click on this, and that gives us a block as defined like this. And let's say what we'll do is we'll print login completed when someone presses that button. So check it out. Look at that. I mean, in a few minutes, I've rapidly prototyped a SwiftUI version of the login form. In fact, if we run this guy, let's see what happens here. We can see that, remember I used text, not text fields over here because I'm keeping it simple, but at least the login button works. So you get the idea. We'll get into the guts of SwiftUI later and why this and why that and why is it complicated and why is it not complicated. Forget all that now. Just watch the video, think about it, let it sink in, sleep on it, come back to iosbrain.com and we'll get into the details of SwiftUI. There's many more videos coming. I hope you join me. Thank you.